Greetings, my friends. Father Leo here, and we are coming up to the fifth Sunday of Lent, and very soon Palm Sunday, Easter Sunday. So there's big days ahead of us, and of course there's all the services of Holy Week, Holy Thursday night, the Eucharist, Good Friday, the death of Jesus, Easter Sunday, the resurrection, and then moving on into Pentecost. So they are very, very important liturgical functions of the year for us. I'm looking at today's readings, of course, because that's where I gather my inspiration and some kind of a guidance of what I might talk about on the Sunday morning. And the first reading from Ezekiel. Now, Ezekiel was a famous prophet long before Jesus. Ezekiel was known as a prophet, a dreamer, a visionary. And so they were very, very important people in the histories of the Jewish race. Very important people, the prophets and the dreamers and the visionaries. And that's who Ezekiel was. And he's well known in his prophetic utterances. So in today's first reading, we have a quote from him. He says, "I'm going to open your graves." Well, opening the graves, he's talking about God opening people's eyes. That people at the grave, you don't see too good, right? Well, that's what he's talking about, people living unaware. So when he says, "I'm going to open your graves," I'm going to open your eyes. I'm going to help you become aware. I'm helping you to become more conscious. So those are some of the key words that we would use today. We don't ordinarily talk about the metaphor of opening your graves, but we do talk about those words of awareness, seeing better, seeing anew, the raising of consciousness, all of that. Those are the kind of words we use today. And then he goes on to say, "I will put my spirit within you." There's it. My spirit, the very Spirit of God, himself, herself, placed within human beings. Therefore, you and I are able to know that we are spirit people. We are spirit people. And the Holy Spirit, as we call him, now today it's more fashionable to call it the Great Spirit, but for Catholic Christians for a long time, it's been the Holy Spirit. But same idea, different language. The Great Spirit, I like the term Great Spirit, right from the very beginning, way back and beyond. And so we are spirit people who are moved by the Spirit to do good. And you know, perhaps if you're in a school, they talk about school spirit. Some schools have a great school spirit where there's real achievements, togetherness, unity, moving forward together, good school spirit. On the other hand, we maybe know some schools that did not have a good school spirit. Struggles, very often conflict, sometimes violence. So we all know the difference between good spirit and the not good spirit. So that's what he's saying, that all people will be given the Spirit of God. Unfortunately, most people are not aware of it and don't allow the Spirit to work in their lives. But to show that the Spirit is really alive in the life of Jesus, we go to the Gospel. And the Gospel for Sunday, it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story from John's Gospel. And it's a story of a dear friend, Lazarus, who died. Yep, he died. And so the sisters, Martha and Mary, send word to Jesus, "Your friend has died." And they send word the same as we do. If a friend dies, we get the word out so they can gather and support us. And that's what they were doing. And so Jesus came to them, and they got a lot more support than they thought they were going to get. They and all the people around there who were mourning the death of Lazarus were astounded at what the Spirit did in and through the power given to Jesus. Because he went to the grave and he was crying. He had the human feelings too. His dear friend had died. And then when he's there, he calls out, Lazarus, come out. Now, I dare say most of the people standing around there said, oh my God, what is he doing? Lazarus, come out. The guy's dead. He can't come out. All kinds of skepticism, if you will. And then all of a sudden they take a look, and here he is. Lazarus walks out of the tomb. Hey, that'll give you some food for thought, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it make you think, sit up and take notice? But it's not done yet. Here's the key, what I want to stress today. Jesus then said, because after all, you know, when they buried them in those days, they didn't use caskets the way we did. Well, of course, they didn't do cremation either, but they wrapped people in burial cloth, wrapped the body in the burial cloth. And so when poor Lazarus stumbled out of the grave, he's bound up tight in all those linen cloths that are surrounding his body. And as at that point, Jesus finishes his task. For he says to the people, I've done what I had to do, now you've got to do something. Unbind him and let him go. So there's the interplay I want to stress today. Jesus did what Jesus did. He called Lazarus forth from the grave. And Lazarus comes stumbling out. So Jesus did his part, but it's not finished. Lazarus is wrapped up tight in all the linen cloth. And that's when Jesus then turns it over to the community. He said, you got a role to play in this. You have a chance to do something as well. And what you need to do is unbind him and let him go. Unbind him. In other words, you have to come forward and unwind all those cloths that are wound around his body. And when you unwind them, then now he's not only alive and healthy, he's free. He's free to go about his business of living. Free to live life fully. And that's really the important part of that story. You know, important part of that story is the power of the great Spirit in the mind and the heart of Jesus. And he used that power because he was empowered by the Spirit to call Lazarus forth. And that's the story. And the other part of the story is Lazarus came forth. And I'm sure most of the people were surprised. I'll bet his sisters Mary and Martha were surprised. Everybody would be standing there with their mouth open in awe and wonder, what's going on here? We've never seen this before. But you're seeing it now, Jesus said. That's what happens when you believe in me. And when the power of the Spirit works in you, you will do fantastic things. You will be able to really work and do ministry with power. With power. With the power of the Holy Spirit, or what I would call the Great Spirit. The Spirit who dwells within you, within the community. That power is available to all of you. You just didn't know it. You didn't realize it. Even though Ezekiel had foretold it, you still didn't believe it. Now seeing is believing. You have seen it. The power of the Spirit empowering Jesus to call Lazarus forth. And of course, as you know, there are many different types of graves. There's the physical one, yes, indeed. But there's also the grave, those bindings which stifle the life of people. Poverty is one of them. Poverty is a big one. The toll of war on civil society, on citizens of a country. And we think right now of the people in the Ukraine, how they're living in a grave, the grave of the violence of war, and their life is diminished tremendously by that war, the invasion of the Russians. And so, and not only that, but also the Russian people, because every soldier, Russian soldier that's killed, back in Russia, there's a mother and a father and brother and sisters, uncles and aunts, who are grieving the death of that young Russian soldier. So it's that grave of grief and mourning, sadness. It's a grave. That's another symbol for grave. There are people who are disempowered because they're told they're no good or they're not good enough. Wherever there is discrimination, where there is racism, a lot of people who are black or brown are experiencing racism, and they are disempowered. And so they are living in that grave. They're not free. They're living in the grave. A lot of religious people are living in the grave because they've been taught and they've learned things about God which are simply not true. They're simply not true. You say, well, what are they? Well, I'll tell you one. It's in our creed, He will judge the living and the dead. That God is a judge. And that when people appear before Him at death, He can then judge them. And if they pass the judgment, they go to heaven. If they don't, they go to hell. False. That's false. It's truly false. I could give you a list of 100 things that I, for one, and people my age were taught, which are simply not true. And we need to be unbound, set free. And it should happen within our faith communities. But the problem is most of the people in our faith communities are also bound. And so we need to free one another. And freeing one another means social justice, love and compassion, helping people to let go false beliefs and embracing beliefs which are more true to the gospel. So there's so many ways in which we need to grow up and realize we are empowered by the Spirit. And we can call people out to come out of your grave, the grave of fear, by helping them to grow and find encouragement and courage. People in poverty, we can bring them out of the grave of poverty by working for social justice. Marginalized people can live in a grave. We can bring them from the grave of being marginalized to being equal and citizens in our country, in our town, our villages. Yes, we can. We can learn and teach people that racism and sexism in any way, shape, or form is enslaving. It enslaves people. And we call them forth by bringing them out in the open and saying, hey, we are equals. And to show you're equals, we'll associate with you, we'll eat with you, we'll drink with you, we'll companion you, but we'll change our attitude. And that's how we'll unbind you, is changing our negative attitudes by letting go our judgments, by letting go our projections. We are able to set people free so they can really embrace life in all its fullness. And that's what that passage is about. That's about that. It's one of the most powerful gospels we'll ever read. One of the most powerful. And it's within our capability, if and when we really do become aware and take ownership of the indwelling Spirit, the great Spirit who dwells within us. And by creating Christian communities which first of all, free one another. And then as a community, in the communities, we're able to bring that to other people. It's not a matter of making Christians out of them. It's a matter of unbinding them and setting them free. That's really what the gospel is about today. And I really think we need to take it seriously. I really do. Because so many of our towns and villages are filled with people who are bound up by prejudice, discrimination, judgment, condemnation, poverty, marginalization, wealth and richness. Yes, lots of wealthy people are bound up. They really are. Their obsession with money and everything that money can buy, that's an obsession. It's an addiction, and they need to be set free. So it's not just the poor people, it's also the rich people.
Chris Cleary.
Okay? God bless, and we talk to you again. Bye-bye.